It's amazing what some people can get away with just because they look right and play the part. Beware, it could be a wolf in sheep's clothing. In 1842, a mysterious young academic charms his way into a prominent family in upstate New York. His hard work and loyalty initially impressed the family, but they quickly learned that he's also arrogant, jealous, and vengeful. True crime podcast Tenfold More Wicked covers the real-life saga of one of America's most intelligent killers, Edward Rulloff. Author and podcast host Kate Winkler Dawson joins us with this story. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning. Good to see you again.
All right. We have finally, it's all out in the open right now. America, I think people in general are obsessed with true crime. Why do you think that is?
You know, I think about true crime kind of the way that I think about sci-fi. It's an escape into a world that, at least in the case of true crime, we hope none of us will actually have to enter. But I think it's just, in some ways, just so outlandish and fantastical that we just, we don't understand how people either get themselves into this situation or capable of doing this. It's just so out of the norm. I think it's fascinating to a lot of people, particularly women.
Yeah. You're a journalist, you're a professor. You wrote the book American Sherlock, Murder Forensics and the Birth of American CSI, which is such a fascinating book because we see all kinds of series and movies and things based on that today. It's the forensics techniques that were used back then, many of them followed up on today. Okay, Tenfold More Wicked, the podcast. Tell us how you came about that title.
Well, the title itself is actually, I've had a couple of listeners pick up on this. It's a quote from Jekyll and Hyde. And it's when Dr. Jekyll, it's how he describes how much, more malevolent he's become because of being Mr. Hyde. So it's tenfold more wicked. And just because I love literature and I love historical true crime stories, I just thought it was a very accurate title for the type of stories I do. And most of these seasons that you'll see, we start season 2 in 2 weeks. Most of these seasons are about people with double lives, people you would never suspect could do the things that they've done. And so I just thought it was appropriate to have a Jekyll and Hyde quote in there.
Yeah, in fact, Edward Rulloff, brilliant academic, murdered his family in 1845. And then when he was caught, citizens like Mark Twain are like coming to his defense.
Yeah, it's very odd. That's one of the many twists in this story. Edward Rulloff was a genius and he was an academic and he was self-taught, and he thought that he had come across this brilliant theory in linguistics that would have been a huge deal. And so you have an awful lot of people after he's done with this 30-year crime spree, like Mark Twain, like Horace Greeley, who was a very prominent politician in the 1800s in New York, all saying, listen, let's not execute this guy. He's too valuable. His brain is too valuable to waste on the gallows. And so they worked very hard to save his life. It's an interesting story, an interesting twist in that, what is more important, this thing that can really make our lives better, or the lives of at least, 5 innocent people. So it's an interesting debate. And many of these seasons are like that. Many times true crime especially, it's just not black and white. It's not that the easy thing. So I really love
and it challenges
like
us on our thoughts of stereotypes. I mean, I have actually seen a jury decide that somebody was not guilty because they thought the guy was too good looking. I actually saw that happen, right? And I had to go to retrial. But, in this case, it was somebody, they don't look the part. Well, what is the part?
Right.
Especially with a psychopath, oftentimes they are very smart. They are very cunning. That's how they can get the job done.
Well, in the 1800s, that just wasn't the case. Rulloff was really sort of the avatar for the Ted Bundy, charming wolf in sheep's clothing. In the 1800s, a man's handshake was good enough for a lot of people. So this was very unusual. And they were, and I think that's why this case, for people in the Gilded Age, it was really fascinating for them, because this was so outside of the norm. He was an outlier. He was someone that so many people had met and just said, this man is not capable of doing the horrible things that he did.
Yeah.
So I think we are now not as surprised because of these Ted Bundys, and there have been people who have defied the norms, but in the 1800s, boy, he was really singular.
Yeah, they wanted to study his brain, right?
They did, and it became very. I'm not going to spoil. So I always spoil my books and my podcast. I'm not going to spoil this one, but it became. There's the brain. It became very important. If you want to see the brain, it's on display at Cornell University. I was actually able to carry the brain. I wanted to poke at it, but I wasn't allowed. I wanted to see what it was like to see this 19th century brain, and I think that. We become fascinated by the criminal mind and the brain. I mean, these are, separate issues that intersect in the courtroom all the time.
Yeah.
The MRIs from somebody's past that a defense attorney is hoping will at least mitigate a sentence when somebody does something, and you could try to blame it on their brain damage, or the way it's structured. So this all comes up much earlier than I think most historians know.
We're out of time, but you and I used to work together in Austin, and had I known this about you, I might have been a little more concerned. But anyway, it's absolutely fascinating. But thank you so much for joining us this morning, and look forward to the next podcast.